I'm here today to talk about domestic violence. And a lot of you know that domestic violence has been a scourge that has plagued all communities, but especially the African American community. And as the publisher of a weekly newspaper, and as a frequent participant with faith-based leaders and educators and various community-based groups that are trying to help develop self-sufficiency, I have discovered that this is a concern and a phenomenon that has brought great shame both to the perpetrators of domestic violence as well as the recipient.
Somehow society has called on us to forget, that's my sister, that's my daughter, that's my niece, that's my mom. And you know, that ladies who we care about, if it's okay to do that to a lady, then the cancer spreads, and anything you wouldn't want someone to do to your sister, to your mom, to your niece, to your auntie, you need to stop it, because eventually that man or others like him will get to your family.
If you were given the opportunity to talk to someone who was going through an abusive marriage, what advice would you give them?
Get out. The first hit, get out. The first slap, the first put down, get out. Because it only escalates from there. It doesn't get any better. It does not. I was in it for 23 years. It don't get any better.
Do you think alcohol played a major role?
Ooh, yes, a major role.
Do you think it was the cause?
I think that also when we got married, we were both in the world. When I got into church, he was still in the world. And so the alcohol and what made his issues that he had per se before we got married, he didn't get rid of them. And it plays, there's a lot going on.
I think another issue that we see, and you know, oftentimes pastors are really busy and we understand that, but especially with large congregations, is that the pastor may not always, or the faith leaders may not always be accessible. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people come and they want to divulge information about what's going on with them, but they have to make an appointment, or they get passed to somebody else, and the person actually wants to speak directly to who they have the most trust and the most faith in. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they're turned away, and I understand that it's not intentional, but they don't feel comfortable sharing that information with just anybody. There's a certain level of trust required to share that kind of information with somebody that you, one, believe will keep it confidential, and two, somebody that really has the authority and the capability to be able to support you. And so oftentimes we see that members walking away feeling unsupported simply because the faith leader was inaccessible.
Why do you think men or perpetrators abuse?
I think it's inherited sometimes. I think that a lot of times men come from, you know, we just finished I'm dealing in my church right now with dealing with pains and emotions and scars. And we had a man that stood up and apologized to women because he had been broken and hurt so much in his family that he took it out on everybody else. Now here's the key. He'd been in the church, but the men folk don't see it. And he didn't feel comfortable enough to go to them and say, I need help learning how to deal with anger. I need help learning how to deal with conflict management, because when I came up, this is what I was accustomed to.
No, Paris, you don't smell liquor on me.
I told you to be quiet. Shut up! Who you talking to like that?
Paris, please, you gotta stop.
Take your money and right now. Shut up! Shut up!
Mommy, I'm tired. I'm tired. I ain't scared of you no more. I'm tired of putting your hands on me.
Come here! Come here! Come here! I'm gonna walk away this time. You know why, nigga? You know why? Oh, you made me do stupid shit! I love you! But you make me angry right now.
And sometimes what it can feel like for a woman is we have shifted the light from the one who is suffering in the experience to training the brothers. And both have to happen.
Isn't it tragic that we try to pretend like we don't see what we see? Isn't it upsetting how we close our ears when our children tell us about Uncle Bob's hands? What's wrong with us that we tell women who are consistently beaten by men who say they love them that they ought to just stay there and pray? Prayer does do a lot of things, but when a fist is upside your head, pray after you get away.
You look at it from the woman's eyes who sees the police department coming into the community, and they enforce the law. That's what they're there to do, enforce the law. So you broke the law. There is no compassion with the law. It's the law. And that means that I don't care if I'm dragging your husband, boyfriend, significant other out of your household. The law is that he hit you or he pulled a gun or whatever he did, you broke the law. I don't care if your kids see it. I don't care if you have to go to court. I don't care if your rent don't get paid. I don't care if you don't have any food. I don't care if he's the food bringer. He's going to jail. So when a woman goes through all that in her mind, my God, if he leaves, I can't pay my rent, my kids are seeing all of this, he's going to be in jail, I got to take off my job to go to court. Never mind. Leave him alone. That's the law. And the law should be upheld. That's once again where we come in. We come in because we're not the law. We're not taking you to jail. We're not going to stop you from being a provider. What we're going to do is try to be an intercessor and be able to help you to work it out and look at your family and look at it in a different way. So if me as a woman that has looked at the African American community and seen my sons and husbands pulled out and put in jail and families torn apart, no, I'm not going to call. No.
And the other thing that I think is so important is we act as if the victim is thinking clearly. We act as if the victim is not traumatized, and so whatever step is taken out of the experience is one taken by a person who is traumatized.
Tonya Mccall is the person that I'm thinking about. She was a member of the church and a faithful member, and her husband was having problems in their marriage. She had decided to separate herself from him, and he could not find her because she went somewhere and hid. He couldn't find her, but she had moved out of the home because of the domestic violence that was going on. And so the only thing he knew where she would be is on Sunday morning. She was so faithful to the church. He knew she would be at the church. And sure enough, 8 o'clock service, she came to church like she always did, and he was waiting outside the parking lot of the church. And when she drove in, he drove in behind her, and when she got out of the car, he ran her down and shot her dead on the parking lot of this church. Well, what it did for me is, first of all, it upset me so much. I was so upset to know that he would have the audacity to come on the church property and kill his wife, stand over her and shoot her, and then pump 3 or 4 more bullets in her after she was down, and then get in his car and speed off.
And wanting somebody to get what my circumstance was, wanting somebody to intervene. The coaching I got was after being raped. The coaching I got was that I would be re-victimized and that it was not safe to tell. I know I cannot do it all. I'm not equipped to. But I love the work that A Safe Place does because they are equipped. They have the training, they have the resources, they know the law, they're equipped to support everyone who comes in what the next step should be.
When you find somebody who disrespects you, that beats you up and calls you names that you were not given, that's when you need to start looking for a safe place. A place that separates you from people who just talk love but don't do love.
And my religious leaders in the Army were quite different from the religious leaders today, because as soon as you go and talk to the chaplain about your problem, because my husband abused me, he beat me almost every day. And so when I went to the chaplain to talk to him, all he would do was call my colonel and tell the colonel what we just got through discussing. And my husband has had swords around my throat. He's kicked me in the head with combat boots. My kids would just stand there and hold each other, afraid to go to the MP station and get them to come to the house.
We should be sending our individuals that are leaders, that are trained to be leaders, we should send them to a safe place to go through 40 hours of domestic violence training, because they need to be trained. That's the truth.
And secondly, too, a lot of times, the Caucasian pastors, most of them have money.
Yes,
See, they have money. They're able to send their leaders to,
exactly.
And they're able to do a lot of stuff that most black pastors can't do.
Right.
There's a few of us they can do that.
Yes.
But the average black pastor, especially in the Bay Area, he just doesn't have the finances.
One of the things that I've learned in my time in ministry is that money follows vision. And so if we have the vision, I think that some of the limitations in our ability to effectively address domestic violence have to do with not having the vision to do it or to make it a priority. We can do everything else. We keep the lights on, we keep the heat on, I'm not starving. But when it comes to domestic violence or intimate partner violence, there's no money. Or we're at a shortage of resources, or there's a lack. And so just as I listen and reflect, I'm inclined to believe that in most cases, it's not about the money. Because the question is, if you had all the money to do whatever you want, would you do it? And we're quick to say yes, but we haven't yet.
So if the world had the love of God, how many know there would be no domestic violence? And that's a topic we don't cover too much in the church. We don't say too much about it. And there's so many women, amen, especially in the church, who are suffering in silence. Because domestic violence thrives even in the church. But because you got a position or a title, it's not guilt, it's shame. You don't want to say nothing because you want to play the game that everything's all right when it's not. So in church you live one, I'm preaching now. In church you live one way. And don't let him have a position in the church. You better not go down there and tell that preacher nothing about what's going on in the house, because I want to stay on the deacon board. And you know what, church? We have been guilty. I'm taking blame for it myself because I've seen it even in this church where the man got away clean, but the woman suffered because the church didn't take any action when we knew she was suffering with domestic violence. I want to apologize to all of those women, all of those wives. I want to personally apologize for the church this morning, for the pastors who let it go, let it slide, because it was more important to have that person as an officer.
I love this faith-based initiative that A Safe Place is working on, because I experienced my domestic violence situation while in church. I was a lay minister in a ministry with my then husband, and people often wonder, well, how could that be? How can you be in a church and be experiencing abuse?
Every day he would wake up, he would find some reason to just come and slap me. I could be in there cooking, shining boots, ironing uniforms. He'd come in and just slap me and tell me I deserved it, I needed it.
I think we as pastors and we as preachers and we as godly men have a responsibility to those who we serve to have them equipped to survive in our current environment. A lot of our culture teaches this kind of behavior. Another segment of our culture tolerates this kind of behavior.
Hi, I'm Keith Carson. I'm on the Board of Supervisors, and I'm also the co-chair of the Health Committee for Alameda County. Today we're talking about violence prevention, more specifically about the role that the African American church and faith-based leaders in particular play around violence prevention. I do want to thank Blue Shield of California and Against Domestic Violence program that they have, along with A Safe Place, for focusing on violence prevention. We know that a number of individuals go to their faith leaders in order to receive counseling and support. And we know that in the area of violence prevention, over 2 million individuals were affected by violence prevention last year across this country. And we also know that it unfortunately affects all of our communities. The role that faith-based leaders play is to be able to give counsel to individuals who are affected by violence prevention. They're also able to help identify ways in which they can get help around violence prevention. In some cases, it's getting away from the environment in which they live. In other places, it might be mediating between the environment in which one lives, become mediating and having counseling within the family structure or the neighborhood structure or the support structure. All of those are very vital, important aspects of dealing with violence prevention.
So if I go to the store at the corner and stay 5 minutes, he was at the store and he was pulling guns on me every day and this and until one day I was so afraid of him. That's why I said a lot of times people don't know how to get out of a situation because they don't know who to go to and they don't know where to say or how to handle it, and that was me.
It worries me about people who assume that it's okay to abuse somebody and then tell God you're sorry. What about the person you beat up? What about the person you abused? What about the person you took advantage of?
Domestic violence cuts across all races and cultures and religions. But what we find is that people of all races tend to turn to their faith when they're in crisis. But our project has focused on the African American community because what we have found is that there has been a lack of awareness, there has been an enormous isolation of females who are victimized, and we have focused on the faith community because we recognize that the church has played a role in keeping victims in domestic violence situations, so we feel that they can help prevent domestic violence.
Love is never willing to damage emotionally, spiritually, or physically. The Safe Place is an organization that is dedicated and that is committed for the safety of those who are experiencing domestic violence. And if you're in a relationship where there is domestic violence, be it physical, psychological, then I pray to you, please get help and get help from the right source. Amen. Just because somebody can identify with what you've been through don't mean they're qualified to help you through it. And sometimes we seek help from people who are hurting. And at best what you get is you don't get help, you just get an understanding ear. But things don't change for you. So if you've been a victim of domestic violence, I ask you, please get in contact with that Safe Place and those who are trained to do that. Because God intends for you to live good. He intends for you to live your best. And you can't do that in a violent situation.